Yeah, let's talk about Epiphone a bit, Aljon.
Okay, great. Let's
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, yeah. It's a very well-established brand, isn't it? It's around so long,
Yes.
and it has its own history.
Yep. Ever
Yeah,
since 1873. So yeah, they've
yeah,
been around for a long time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And now we're in our store. We have a lot of the Gibson Inspired by models. And of course, the original collections, Epiphone is well known for. Can you explain to our audience the difference between the inspired by models and the original models, maybe?
Sure. Well, the original models really are part of Epiphone's DNA. As you mentioned earlier, Epiphone is really older than Gibson, and we have a whole entire history of our own models, like the Crestwood or the Wilshire, even the Sheraton and the Casino, that are specific to Epiphone. So those original models, once again, are just a reflection of the Epiphone DNA. And
Yeah.
the Inspired by Gibson, we wanted to make sure we gave a very authentic look and feel and quality to the instruments, once again, that mirrored what we are doing with Gibson at a very accessible price, so people can get that experience of having a Les Paul Standard 50s or a Les Paul Custom or an SG Special or something like that. They're all set neck guitars, except for, of course, the Firebird being a true neck through guitar. And we wanted to make sure that those guitars have the proper components, and the proper feel and look. So the Les Paul Standard 50s will have that classic look. We'll have some vintage style appointments, and then the modern style guitars within that Inspired by Gibson. You have the modern and the originals in that collection of Inspired by Gibsons, and then the moderns will have the different push-pull coil splits and locking tuners and different neck profiles and things of that nature that will be more attuned to a player that wants more features, that wants more sound, maybe a little bit more diversity, for whatever project they want to do. So you have reached both the people that want the bells and whistles, and then the people that want more traditional style guitar.
Right, right. Can we talk a bit more maybe about the inspired by Gibson models, the Western models, for instance?
Okay, so so do you have anyone in particular that is your favorite?
No, I have a few favorites. Well, let's talk about maybe the king of the flat tops, the J200.
Yes. Okay.
That's a real beauty.
Well, they really are. In fact, I have one right next to me. Actually, I look at it every day. Those guitars, those Inspired by Gibson acoustics, once again, take the spirit of what we're doing in Gibson, Montana, made in the USA, but make it, there you go. That's the same one I have right next to me.
Look at
But
it.
yeah, it's all solid wood. In fact, a lot of
Yeah.
the inspiration comes from, our Masterbuilt series of acoustic guitars. So the Masterbuilt Epiphone originals are all solid wood, solid top. We have Sitka spruce tops, great bracing, and we also have this aged finish that we put on the guitar so that it resonates. It's thinner than most poly finishes, but it has a really nice pick guard, those mother of pearl appointments, Indian laurel fretboard. So a lot of those things, once again, just are taken from the Gibson side, and we engineered it to be very accessible in terms of the price, something that real players would love to get in a very accessible guitar, and have those true tone woods, all solid.
Yeah.
And also a glued dovetail neck joint, very similar to what they're doing at Gibson Acoustic. So yeah, those guitars are all great. The Hummingbird, the J200, the J45.
Five, yeah.
Just a wonderful, wonderful guitars. And of course, I love the king of the flat tops, the J200. It's one of my favorites.
It has I think it's a Sitka spruce top, right?
It is Sitka spruce top, and
Yeah.
you'll also notice that the pickguard is very similar to what we're using on Gibson Acoustic as
Yeah.
well. It's
Yeah.
kind of a really nice kind. It's not a thin piece of plastic by any means. It is
No.
very similar to what we're doing in Gibson Acoustic. So people can rest assured that when they buy this, it's a very quality instrument.
Yeah, and a large bridge, the moustache bridge.
Oh, of course, the mustache bridge
Yeah.
that Orville Gibson, the founder, of course, they wanted to put that into the guitar as a tribute to Orville Gibson because he had a mustache very similar to that. So.
Oh, that's why.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. It's a top guitar for way less than 1,000 euros. You already told us, but what really does it make so good? Those guitars.
You know, it's really the factory that we have just really does a great job of putting those guitars together. The engineering team, I work with an amazing team of engineers that are able to take the plans and designs from Gibson Acoustic and really put the heart and soul into these instruments. These are the bracing, the tilt back headstock, the upgraded nut, every component, of course the solid wood. But I think, you know, there's something to be said about how, even though the name King of the Flat Tops is applied to the J200, I'm sorry if you can hear my children crying in the background. but if you listen to the Gibson and you see the Gibson acoustics, they actually have a radius top and back. And when you put that with a bracing together and when you play the guitar, it has a nice kinetic energy that is transferred through the guitar. And we try to do the exact same thing with our Epiphone Inspired by Gibson acoustics as well. You have some of that tone transfer. So when you strum the guitar, it comes alive.
Yeah.
And so I think part of that is the engineering that we've taken from over a century of building these guitars, and really putting in the very best materials. So it comes down to materials and craftsmanship, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about material, for the neck you used, I think, Indian laurel, yeah.
Yeah, Indian laurel in the fretboard, yeah.
And some models have the Pau Ferro fretboard. Mm-hmm. Of course, we know why, because of the rosewood situation from a few years back. Now those problems are behind us. Do you think you will give the guitars a rosewood top again?
I think in terms of the fretboard, there's always that possibility when we can get when those regulations are a lot easier for us to implement and get through. You never know. I think the industry has accepted Indian laurel and has moved toward that, and I think we'll continue to use it, but you never know. I think maybe in some higher end guitars and things like that, we wanted to implement and use rosewood several years ago, but I think you never know. You never know. The door is never shut with these things. As materials change, I think people should be willing to understand and know that we're always working toward getting the instrument with the proper tone woods that people love. So I think that's our goal. So you never say never, but I'm hoping that maybe in the near future that we would continue to use rosewood, and maybe in some other projects we'll have to see down the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit maybe about a 339, for instance?
Sure.
An
Let's talk
ES
about it.
339 and the comparison with a 335. I don't know if it's correct that a 339 was designed for a player with with lesser height, and the 335 is the full size guitar. Is that true?
The 339 for me is a guitar for Les Paul players that want to play semi-hollow. Right? Because it literally is, I'm not a tall guy, but I am a big guy. And I love playing an ES-345. It's the ES-345 is one of my favorites. The 339s and the Lucille's are amazing guitars, and I absolutely love them. Yeah. And I love what we do with the Epiphones, with the Casino and 335. But the 339, I think, for me, is really all about, if you are so used to playing Les Pauls and SGs, you have just a 10% reduction in body size, so it can be a little bit more easily manageable for people that are looking to get that semi-hollow sound of an ES-335 and play it in a compact form factor. So if you're comfortable playing Les Pauls and you're looking for that guitar that really scratches that itch to have that nice woody tone, that acoustic tone that people know and love about the ES335, then the 339 I think is for you.
Right. I have an.
Of course, if you are smaller too. I mean, my wife is a very petite woman, so she loves the smaller body guitars, and that's great for her as well. But really, it's comfortable for anyone, any player whatsoever. And I think that it's just very comfortable. You can play it on the couch, you can play it on stage with very little effort. It's just a really comfortable guitar.
And it doesn't weigh that much, does it?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, and you could put it in a double gig bag, and you could take a couple of them to your gig, and you're good.
A couple of them.
Yeah, that's right.
You can afford them. They're not very expensive.
That's right. At these prices, go ahead and get 2 of them from Bax right now.
Yeah. All right. Buy them at Bax.
That's right. Buy them at Bax. That's my motto.
Yeah, mine too. I have to think about my pension, of course. Huh?
Of course. That's Epiphone is easy on the pension. That's for sure.
Right. Why should a beginning guitar player choose Epiphone over a Gibson mod, do you think? Of course, besides the price.
I think I used to teach music, so when I taught music, flutes and clarinets and bassoons, they were all very expensive instruments, right? So I think you have to get an instrument, whether it's a Gibson or an Epiphone, that inspires you to play. So if you can, and I always say too, get the best instrument that you can afford that will inspire you and feel it. So maybe you want to play a Gibson. Okay, that's great. When you consider how much those orchestra instruments are, because I was a band director, assistant band director, and I actually taught percussion, but when I would go in and teach, those instruments were not cheap. So I would go into a Bax music store and I would look at and play the Gibson and play the Epiphone, but understand that you're getting a quality instrument no matter what you decide you're going to get. What I can tell you is that with Epiphone, regardless of the price, you're going to get a very quality instrument that you'll be happy with, that you'll be able to play, as we say, Epiphone for every stage. So for every stage, whether you're just learning how to play the instrument, learning to master the instrument, and as you grow with you, this instrument will grow and inspire you through time.
Right.
So you can pick up a Les Paul standard Epiphone, like a Les Paul standard Epiphone 50s, or a Les Paul Muse, or a Prophecy guitar, electric guitar, and then you'll be able to play that for the rest of your life, and it will grow with you. You don't have to. You can upgrade. You can get a Gibson. You can get a more expensive Epiphone through time, but you are getting a quality instrument. So if I will say that, get the best instrument you can for the money that you can afford to get. Right. And if that's an Epiphone or if that's a Gibson, then I'm happy. And so
or an artist model, right?
Or an artist model, absolutely.
Yeah. Like how you was. I recently had a chat with James Nichols about his Gold Glory.
That's right. And, I love that Gold Glory.
Yeah, can you tell me a little more about this model? How it?
Yeah, I love it. I actually have it right here.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. I love this guitar so much.
It's
it's just, it's a combination. I'm sure Jared told you. It's just a combination of what you love of a Les Paul Jr. with a single P90, with a Les Paul Standard Gold Top and a Les Paul Custom. And you'll notice that the Les Paul Custom inlays stop at the neck joint. So there's no block inlays here, but Jared's playing really lends itself, to all these other frets. Yeah, you see, there were twins now.
I love this thing.
Absolutely, it's a rock and roll machine.
One pickup, and so versatile.
It is. It really is, and I think it's just a great guitar for all seasons, for all genres. You can play blues, you can play hard rock and heavy metal with it. You can play country. And it's just a really versatile instrument. And once again, sometimes simplicity brings out the best in players. It can expose some players for sure, because there's not a lot of
you can hide
behind it. You can't hide behind it.
No.
I think that's why you have guitar. You have guitar players like Leslie West, for example, and you can't hide. You can't hide with a guitar like that, but it does bring a pureness because of the single pickup and the quality of the tone woods and materials. That's right. And I think there's a pureness, and I think that's what rock and roll is all about. I really dig it.
Can we talk a little bit about Kramer?
Of course, let's talk about it.
Yeah. Because in our assortment at Bax, we also have the some Kramers. Of course, it's a well-known brand as well. From the 80s, when I was playing in the stages, Kramer was a well-known brand, and still you have 3 collections: the original, the modern, and of course the artist collections.
Right.
What type of players should be checking out the, let's say, the original collections?
You know, there's a saying, I feel the need for speed. And if you feel the need for speed, I think you will you'll go to the Kramers easily. They are very fast playing guitars, of course, the original guitars that are built to shred. You know, so if you love hard rock, if you love that, even I've seen people play country, you know, and some jazz with these, but at the end of the day, something like this, like the Night Swan, is just a wonderful guitar. You can play super fast. Of course, it has, you know, a lot of the models come with a Floyd Rose tremolo system. There you have the Snake Sabo. Absolutely.
This is a beautiful one, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's really what it is. I mean, Kramer guitars are made to rock hard. That is our slogan, and it really goes back to the DNA of Kramer in its heyday. You know, Kramer's been around since the 70s, but really came to fruition at its full power and prowess back in the 80s. And we're just bringing it back, you know, so all the Kramer fans like you and I who grew up playing these type of guitars in high schools and in clubs and all that, you know, we're bringing it back full force. So
that's nice to hear. What is your favorite Kramer guitar?
You know, I love this Night Swan.
Yeah.
But I am such a huge Eddie Van Halen fan. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the 84 was my favorite. I fell in love with that guitar back in the day. I remember seeing Eddie Van Halen play that his Kramer on music videos like Panama and things like that when I was growing up, and I fell in love with that. I said to myself, man, one day I'm going to have a Kramer, you know, and I told my parents that'll be my first electric guitar. You know, my mom wanted me to play violin growing up and piano. And then when MTV came out, 1982 was over, I said, I really like these guys. These are great rock and roll. That's amazing. Yeah. So, guys like Eddie Van Halen and Richie Sambora, Dweezil Zappa played Kramer, and I wanted to emulate them, and that 84 was just the stuff for me. So my guitar will always be like that 84/Beretta.
Right, and they come in really strange and outlandish finishes.
Yeah, they will, and we're going to have some guitars. I'm sure Bax is going to get some brand new custom graphics guitars that will be coming out this summer. So be on the lookout for some awesome graphic guitars this summer over at Bax. All
right. Thank you very much, Aljon, for your time.
Thank you. Bye, Bax. Bye, Kramer. Bye, Epiphone. Bye, Gibson.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, Jim, my name is Frank. I'm a buyer and product manager at Bax Music, and I'm so proud to have you on our specials, e-specials, our online event this year, because you are the master luthier at Gibson's. I'm so proud.
I'm proud to be here.
Thank you. How long are you working at Gibson's now?
I've been here 10 years, and I'm going on 42. This will be my 42nd year in the business.
42nd year, and always as a luthier.
Yeah, I started out, I built my first guitar in high school wood shop, and then I got hired as an apprentice in the local music store doing repairs and building. And then I took the shop over after about a year or a year and a half and did that for 9 years, went to PV for 12, Fender for 11, and then now here 10.
All right. Well, that's a big change from Fender to Gibson, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually the same thing. I love your instruments at the back of the video, your tools.
Yeah. That's actually a backdrop. That's my shop at home.
This is the shop at home, right?
Yeah. We're in the middle of remodeling up here, so I just use that for the backdrop until this is
Right.
up and running.
Okay, nice. Well, still nice to look at. Let's start with a general overview, if you will, for our audience. At this time, we have several Gibson Originals in our store, and also moderns from the Modern series, Gibson Modern. In your opinion, when a customer comes in, what should he look for? When should you choose an original collection guitar, and when is a modern collection a better fit for you? What do you think?
That's a good question, and that's why with the new leadership with JC and Cesar, we met to get the product line in order and straighten everything out. And I had the idea to split it between an original series and a modern series, and we mapped those products out accordingly because we felt some players are just more centered towards that original series. So if they're more concerned with the historic aspects, or you find out who their guitar heroes are, if they're, Jimmy Page or, Eric Clapton or Jeff Beck, from the old days playing their Les Pauls, they may want to be in that original series. If they're a younger guy or a ladies, there's, a high percentage of ladies now, I think over 50% playing guitar, and maybe they want something more fresh, with more vibrant colors. Or maybe they want certain features that we don't offer on the original, like locking tuners or push-pull pots for different sounds. You quantify them, just get a conversation going and find out where they're centered, and then you can, put them in the modern or the original series.
Right,
and they
right.
have a lot to offer.
Oh yeah. Also in the original series already, because you have your 50s, your 60s, 70s. What's the biggest difference from the, let's suppose, a standard Les Paul standard 50s in comparison with a 60s model?
That's a good question. Now, in terms of the basic look, right? We wanted to keep that iconic look intact, but then we wanted to direct it towards each specific era. So for the 50s, most notably, visibly, you have the aged top hat tuners, the vintage style Keystone tuners, and then of course that more round 50s, that fuller neck, it's a deeper shape. And for some people, they're really in tune with that feel. And then you may have guys, and they tend to be more progressive or modern players. They like that fast, thin, slim taper neck, and that's what a 60s would have. Right. And that was appropriate for that era. And then we also did the Grover kidney tuners, which, was an upgrade, and that was, featured during that era. So, those offer those specific tuners. And then the 70s is kind of a hybrid between that 50s feel and the 60s feel. So up at the first fret, it's going to be more like that 60s slim taper. But as you progress up to the 12th fret, then it gets deeper, has more of a taper to the neck profile, and it will be fuller, almost like a 50s style.
Right. We have some models in the back here. I saw a SG 61. Where does the 61 fit in this story?
Well, the 61, of course, the Les Paul. I'll try to keep this short because I know we don't have a lot of time for the full story. Yeah. But when we debuted the Les Paul in 1952, and then we discontinued it as we know it in 1960. That was the last year manufacture back in the day, as the Les Paul, as most people know it. Every year, it had significant changes to try to keep it more marketable and viable in the market, but it kind of fell a little short. And so by 1960, they decided that was the last year. They came out with what we now know as the SG. And the first year or two of production, it was actually called the Les Paul model. Yeah. And it's that iconic double cutaway SG body. And that actually has been in the model line ever since it debuted in 61, continuously in the product line. So it's actually our longest running solid body.
Right.
And it wasn't until Clapton used the Les Paul on the Blues Breaker record in 66. That was what I like to say was the shot heard around the world. Right. And at that point, Peter Green and Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck and, Bloomfield, everyone had to have a Les Paul.
Right.
And since then, it's iconic. It's probably our most iconic, but there was that period where it was out of the model line, you know? So it's a very colorful story. And the SG, then when that came into prominence, you had people like, you know, George Harrison and Robbie Krieger and, you know, countless others from that era, you know, embracing the SG. And George Harrison was actually my inspiration. When I decided I wanted to play guitar, I saw a Beatle book and I saw a picture of him with his cherry SG. And I said, that's for me. That's what I want. Yeah. And so, you know, that's a story on how these heroes can influence you, right?
Right.
And, so the SG is a great guitar, and we have so many different varieties. You know, we have our 61 series in 3 different versions, you know, with the stop tail, the sideways Maestro Vibrola, and then the classic Maestro Vibrola.
Right.
And all of them have their fans. That's why we have all of them in the product line.
Right.
And then we have the SG Standard, which has the full face, what we call the Batwing pickguard. And, you know, Angus and Iommi and a lot of players like that played that version. Of course, they played the early 60s versions too, but it's funny when we did our research, it's really split about 50-50 who likes the full face pickguard or the small pickguard version.
Oh, yeah.
Early 60s.
Is it only cosmetic then?
Yeah, you know, well, that's a good point. You know, it is primarily cosmetic. However, one subtle detail with that full face pickguard and the pickups mounted in that pickguard, they're not parallel with the plane of the strings. Yeah. They're kind of like that.
Yeah.
And because of that, one side of the humbucker will be a little more dominant than the other side. Yeah. And so it'll give it a little bit more edge and cut. Yeah. And so I think a lot of players like that, they just know it sounds good. They don't know the science behind it, but that's why they gravitate towards it, I feel.
Right.
And so it works, and it's a great thing. And like I said, it's about half and half on who prefers which version. So they both have their sound, they both have their look, and they both have their feel.
Right. Talking about feel, how many necks do you use on your different models? Because you have the rounded C, the vintage 50s, slim taper necks.
For the 2020 model line, we kind of streamlined that. We had a few different slim taper necks with different dimensions on the depth, and it was kind of confusing. So some players might feel a SG with a slim taper neck and say, oh, I really like that. And then they see an Explorer or a Flying V and go, oh yeah, well, that has a slim taper, I'll get that. But dimensionally, they were slightly different. So we standardized that to the most popular early 60s variety. I think some of those other models got too slender during the 80s when they were going for that shred era. They got too thin. So we standardized it to that 60s dimension, which is 800 and 900, you know, at the 1st and 12th fret. So it's very slim, and it does have that rounded C profile. You know, it doesn't have the shoulders on the side, and it's a very fast neck. And on an SG especially, it works great. The Les Paul 60 has that same neck. So it's a very fast neck. And players who, and a lot of players who are more progressive and have what I call proper hand placement with their thumb on the back of the neck, typically like that slim taper neck, although it's not exclusive. It's just a lot of them have that. I am that old school bluesy kind of influenced player, so I have that thumb over the top of the neck. So I do have some slim tapers. I prefer the 50s neck myself.
A bit chunkier.
A bit chunkier, but you know, I just prefer that feel. And with a thumb over the neck, it just suits my style. However, let me explain this too. If I have, like I have, you know, my original 57 Special is what, you know, I brought in and we used to repattern that 50s neck profile. So it's not as deep as some of the really big 50s. It's a little bit smaller than that, and it has less shoulder. So instead of being that full round or that almost D shape like some were in the past, this has almost kind of like a little less shoulder, not quite a V, but it doesn't have that D kind of shape. So it's still full, but it's very comfortable. And if I'm playing a Les Paul, I personally prefer that style neck. But if I'm playing an SG, that kind of neck doesn't translate to the SG model because of the the physical size of the body and the balance and the weight. And in that case, I really do prefer the 61 slim taper style neck.
Right, right.
So there's no right or wrong. To me, it depends on your personal style and what the guitar model is.
Yeah, but one really interesting question that returns all the time. We were talking about thin necks, do you think, in your opinion, is it a myth that thinner necks don't resonate that much? So, what do you feel? Thicker necks influence the sound a little bit more? What's really the truth?
Yeah, in general, if I had to just tell you my rule is, but I still have to explain. My rule is bigger neck, bigger strings, bigger sound.
Right.
So a lot of that resonance of the guitar is coming off of that neck. So if you take a solid body and you strum a chord, you know, and move it past your ear, you'll find a lot of that sound that you're hearing, you know, with it unplugged, is coming off of that neck. So I feel that the neck contributes to a lot of that. However, it all depends on the strings you're using too. It's a balance.
Right.
So if it's a heavier set of strings and a bigger neck, it'll excite that neck. If you have a really big neck and an extremely light set of strings, it may not excite it quite as much. So there's that balance. And then it's Mother Nature that, you know, that wood, you know, can vary. You may listen to 6 different Les Pauls with big fat necks, and you know, maybe 1 or 2 may be, you know, audibly more resonant than the other ones.
Right,
but
right.
in general, I say, yeah, I agree. Typically a bigger neck is more sound, and bigger strings too. If you're playing 9s and you go to a set of 10s, that's on average a 10% increase of steel that's exciting the pickups.
Right.
So that's 10% more steel that's part of that circuit. So
Right.
you're naturally going to have more volume with a heavier set of strings. But then again, it's a personal preference. You know, Billy Gibbons uses, you know, very, very light,
Yeah.
you know, 7s, I heard,
Yeah.
or 8s. And same with, you know, Tony Iommi. And they have, you know, those 2 players are noted for their big, huge, fat sound.
Right.
So it depends on the entire package and your path and the player.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What we see is that the P90 is back. Yeah, it's gaining in popularity. Why is that, you think?
Well, I think a lot of players rediscovered, you know, what and it's really a versatile pickup. And when they've done a lot of research, you find that a lot of classic recordings use the P90. You know, certainly a lot of, you know, the humbucker didn't, you know, come into prominence until 57 when we introduced it. But there was a lot of that early rock and roll and country that used that P90 prior to that. And of course, jazz and blues. So, you know, players like Freddie King had a Les Paul Gold Top with P90s that he used for a lot of years before he got that 355 that he adopted with humbuckers.
Right.
And Leslie West had his Les Paul Jr., you know, with that dog ear P90, and he got a huge sound.
Yeah.
And so it's a very versatile pickup. If you're playing it, you know, in a bluesy or jazzy setting, it'll sound very smooth and full. If you're just cranking up your Marshall and playing rock and roll, you know, you can get it to sound like Leslie West or Paul Kossoff, you know, from Free. It'll growl and snarl, and it just has a great rock and roll sound. And, you know, if you're playing it clean, you know, going for a country or bluesy sound, it has that edge because it's just a big, huge, fat single coil. So it's a great pickup.
Yeah, and it sounds really great on a Les Paul too, don't you think?
It does, it does.
Yeah.
And another great example of that is the solo in The Wall by Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
That's a 56 Les Paul Gold Top with P90s.
Is it?
Yeah. So a lot of players think he's playing his Strat, but on that solo, that's that Gold Top with P90s.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's a good
great
one.
Sound too.
Yeah. Now we're very talking into detail, I guess. Just one last question. A myth about the orange drop capacitor. Why is it so important for the sound, you think?
The orange drop, you know, it's a very, very upscale, you know, technologically capacitor, right? It's very well made. Its poly composition is less prone to microphonics, like a lot of the ceramic capacitors, if you're playing very high volume, they'll be more prone to microphonics, which a lot of people don't understand that, is where a lot of that can emanate from. Right. So it's less prone to microphonics. It's just more physically stable because of that poly construction. It's less susceptible to picking up moisture, like some of the early, paper and, wax caps and things like that. So it's structurally more sound, and construction wise, because it's so big, physically bigger, it's just more durable and robust. Right. So, when you have a hand wired control assembly, it's nice to have a robust component like that, because if your controls happen to work loose and rotate, it's not going to snap, because the leads are more substantial. Right. And in terms of sound, now that's a tough one, honestly, because it's hard to really quantify, because all those details, they do make a difference, but honestly, it's hard to really, if you give me, a guitar and we're playing low volume where you're not going to really hear all those details, it would even be hard for me to tell you that difference. But theoretically, all those factors play into why it's more upscale. And of course, we have the history, in the 60s with all our hand-wired tube amps, we use the orange drops. Right. So it's just a bit more upscale and a bit more robust component in terms of that structure. All right. Well, so it does make a difference. However, let me explain this too. In certain models, if we have, like in our Les Paul Classic or Modern, we have our push-pull assemblies that are very, advanced, and there's a lot going on in there. For those type of assemblies, I prefer the small polys. They're still polys, but they're a lot smaller, and they have a lot of benefits that the orange drops would have, except that physically smaller form factor makes it more stable in that type of assembly, because it can be installed on that pot and it's not spanning across the others, and it saves space. So it's really the best component in those types of assemblies. Right. So we try to choose and place those components where it's appropriate. Right. Well, you're doing a great job, Jim. So thank you very much. Sure. For sharing this information with our audience. I'm sure it will benefit them and make a choice maybe a bit more easy. Good. Yeah. Thank you for your time again, Jim. Absolutely. Thank you, and it was wonderful to talk to you. Yeah. Same here. Bye. Look forward to next time. Yeah. Well, Sterling, thanks for being in our live event. Absolutely, it's good to be here. Yeah, at Bax Music. Every year we do some events and workshops for our customers so they can learn a bit more about the brands we sell. And you're Director of Marketing at Gibson, aren't you? Correct, that is correct. Right. And what most people don't know, that KRK monitors are also a Gibson brand. That is absolutely correct, yes, for many years now. Yeah, can you tell me a little bit of history of KRK? Yeah, sure. So KRK, I have to tell you, I've been with the company now for almost 2 years, and when I came in, I was really actually excited that KRK was in the portfolio, because this is a brand that has been in my musical life since I was very, very young. KRK is a pretty storied brand. It's been around over 3 decades, and the moniker KRK actually stands for the name of the guy that created KRK monitors, right? And so, essentially from what I've heard, and I haven't spoken to him directly, but he was just very dissatisfied with what he was finding out on the market in terms of, his ability to fine tune, mix and master. I think he was working on some film scores and stuff at the time, plus music. And back then, if you think about, what was around back then, the idea of an actual professional studio monitor, relatively speaking, is kind of a new phenomenon. So, you think back 35 years and what was around, and there really wasn't a lot. So he saw that there was an opportunity to innovate, and that's where KRK came from. And I encountered KRK, my first time was in college. I went to school at the Art Institute of Seattle for music engineering and music business.
All right.
And we had the first generation of KRK rockets in studio. It was the first time, you know, it was an old funky looking kind of triangular looking deal, you know. And so those are what we had that we were using among some other monitors. And we started a production team in college and found some KRKs, and you know, years and years later had a recording studio with a friend of mine, and we employed KRKs and VXTs, and you know, it just keeps occurring in my life. Every studio I'm in, I happen to kind of see KRK, and it's been just a true honor and a pleasure to be working on a brand that I love, and I've had so much connective tissue in my personal and professional life.
Right.
So yeah, it's good to be here with you and talking about where we're now taking the brand as well.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It's obviously a very prominent brand within, you know, music production, but we're really invested on making sure that this brand continues to be extremely healthy and in front of consumers. And especially now with a bunch of pandemic producers that have come in to music, you know, creation and production over the last 12 to 16 months, really, we've really seen a tremendous spike in growth for the brand, not only in sales, but just our brand presentation and artists that are using KRK and posting themselves on social media. It seems KRK is a bit omnipresent on social media in many ways. And so we're just incredibly excited about where it's going.
Right, right. It's visible, but it's also very good quality, of course, because it's one of the top selling brands at Bax for years, KRK. And if you see the history of the development of the monitors, you see actually that KRK is trying to think with the producer, with the artist, to develop a better product, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. You know, recently, within the last, I'd say 6 months, and there was some ideation previous to putting this formalized group together, but we now have a roster of artists and producers and engineers, our KRK Creator Alliance, and we're up to about a dozen artists now. And essentially our goal here is that in order for us to concept, you know, the next generation of KRK and to make sure that we're serving the needs of the creative community, we felt like we needed to hear from the artist community directly.
Right.
And so a lot of that has been, you know, hosting many virtual town halls where we do Zoom meetings like this, and we talk with our Creator Alliance, and we talk about our product roadmap. We talk about what's currently in the roadmap and maybe what's missing, or maybe where we need to tweak some things, maybe where we need to create some things that are brand new and continue to elevate the portfolio, but also to ensure that they have a voice in where we're taking the brand and our marketing and communications as well, because there's no better influencer on the face of the planet than the artists that we work with.
Right, right.
And I think you'd be, you know, it may be obvious, but it's worth stating that many of the artists that we work with our other brands in the portfolio, Gibson, Epiphone, even Kramer, these are all KRK devotees as well.
Right.
And so we've got quite a bit of connective tissue between our guitar business and our monitor business. And of course, as you've seen as well, you know, there's just a tremendous flood of creatives that have come into the market, and they are now opting for a home studio environment. They're picking up a pair of KRKs, they're plugging into audio interfaces, and they're doing all of their, you know, guitar-based production in a digital environment with KRKs, and that's tremendously cool to see that thing taking place. Right,
right. The latest one, I don't know if you can see it, but it's here on the studio floor, is the sub.
Yeah.
The new 10-inch sub.
Let me just say, the subs are on the way. Okay, I know everybody's been asking. They're on the boat.
They're on the boat.
They're on the
almost
boat and
at
arriving
Bax.
soon.
Yeah, almost at Bax.
Yeah.
Yeah, and can you tell me something about the development of the subs?
Yeah, absolutely. So Craig Hockenberry, who's our chief engineer, when he was looking at the sub line and looking at refreshing it, I think some of the things we noticed were that the subs were a little bit, these generally will sit next to your feet, obviously under your desk.
Right.
And I think we were feeling like the profile for a lot of desks was a little too deep. And so we wanted to make it a little shallower, and yet, you know, just ever so bit, you know, a little more wide.
Right.
The port used to be on the side. Now we've got it underneath, and what we're just finding is it's a better dynamic presentation. But mainly it was, you know, a lot of the guts of the subs are the same. We didn't want to change what was working. You know, we included a lot of our artists and talked to consumers about, you know, what would you change if you could. Nothing came back on the that was material anyway of the actual performance of the subs. It was just the aesthetics. I just feel like, you know, potentially they were looking a little dated. They did need an aesthetic refresh, but also if they could be just a little bit more akin to where you would put them down in the space, and they would fit a little bit better next to your feet in most desks, then that was the conventional thinking behind changing the form factor on those.
Right, right. So the form changed a little bit, but I know as a fact that KRK does support artists, creatives, and producers also. Can you tell me a little bit about the landscape after the pandemic? How will KRK look then?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think in many ways the dynamic of production has changed quite a bit. What we've been hearing from our artists is that given the pandemic circumstances, and, you know, creatives have to be creative. They have to continue to produce and create. And many of them are working artists, and so they needed to continue to work. And when you don't have the ability to go into the studio or travel and tour, then really you're left to your own devices in your home studio. And I think what's been really, really awesome to see is a lot of artists have, they've kind of taken destiny into their own hands in terms of their production.
Right.
A lot of our artists built out home studios over the course of the last year and really learned a lot of advanced production techniques that they were not familiar with before. So, you know, we've talked to artist over artist that, you know, yeah, they had, you know, some semblance of a setup in their home studio, but they took it the extra mile and, you know, created a full production scenario where they had, you know, several sets of monitors, audio interfaces, outboard gear, upgraded headphones, upgraded their laptops and computers and whatever they were producing on. Just tended to do a hard reset and refresh on their creative environment, and now are almost fully sustaining. So many artists have the ability to not only just cut a demo at home to take to their producers in the studio or their engineers, but now they're fully producing albums almost end to end to the point of mastering within their home studios.
Right.
And I think that's allowed a lot of artists a flexibility and a freedom that they didn't have before, just because they were forced to learn these techniques and understand the gear that they were buying at a deeper level and be able to speak the language of the producer and engineer. What's really, really interesting as well is we've talked to engineers where, you know, now we're starting to get back into some ways of in-person production, and we've been working with a couple artists that are back to cutting records in studios. It was really interesting because I was at a video shoot recently with an artist here, Jared James Nichols.
Yeah, I know him.
And he's one of our, you know, he's got KRKs in his home studio, and he's had to kind of figure out some new production techniques. And, you know, it's been interesting to see the language he's using when he's walking into the studio now. I feel like he's about 2 steps ahead of like where the engineer is, you know, because he's been able to think through the signal processing chain to a greater degree. This is true with other artists we've heard with and engineers that we've talked to, where artists are coming into the studio not only with more fully produced pieces, but they're using a language, a technical language that they didn't possess before, because they've had to learn this new language and these techniques. And for a lot of engineers, for them, that's a breath of fresh air, because they can get farther faster. They don't have to explain things.
Right.
And they're more in tune with what the artist is looking for from them because they can speak the same language. It's been really, really awesome to see that.
Right, right. And how do you think the KRK will support the artists in the future also?
Yeah. So not only through our Creator Alliance, which will continue to grow, and that will be a group that we continue to pressure test our ideas against professional working artists, but we've really elevated our social media presence as well.
Right.
You know, the no-brainer is obviously social media is such an important part of everything that we do in a marketing mix. But the one thing that we've really engaged in at a higher level in this last year is working with artists one-on-one to not only get deeper involved in their creative narrative and reposting of their stories and accumulating content from them that specifically highlights them and their craft. You know, we had been very product forward before. Hey, look at this new product and look at this product and look at this product. And, you know, that's important. It's important to continue to educate consumers about what we make and why we make it. But when you highlight the artist story, when these products are in the hands of artists and what they're doing in the creative spectrum, for a consumer, that really helps put all the pieces in place.
Yes, exactly.
You're getting that artist endorsement of like, hey, I really respect this engineer.
Right.
I really respect this producer and the kind of music they're making. Hey, they're using KRKs. Why? And then, you know, you start digging into these storylines and you get deeper. It really starts to answer all of the questions that a consumer would have. Why should I use these products? How am I going to use these products?
Right.
So our artists have become incredibly important in telling the story of the product on our behalf.
Right, right. You already told us that the new subs were on the way to us.
On the way,
They're on the ocean.
They're on the ocean. It sounded good.
Yeah, and
I have this weird. I keep having this weird thought of like these subs being on, you know, ships coming over across the sea, and just if there's just a chance that somebody plugged a couple of them in and just like that boat is rocking its way, you know what I mean? Just like
that will be fun. Yeah,
this huge bass barge showing up like the subs are here.
Yeah. That will give a large tsunami, I suppose.
Yeah, you can hear it coming, right?
One other thing I still want to talk about, because I'm a product manager also, I want to talk about very quick, a new KNS 4600 headphones.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So the headphones are getting refreshed. We're actually taking those a step deeper. So
right.
I'll grab mine here. I've got my 6400s right here. So the 6400s are going to be refreshed into a 6402, essentially the same form factor, just an upgraded little bit of form factor on the outside, just a little more sturdy, the same mechanics, the same dynamics. Nothing is going to change about the headphones except for the form factor on the outside. 8400s will get a refresh as well. There'll be 8402s. I don't have a pair in studio with me right now, but the outer housing on those is really kind of it's a ghosted black. So they're very sleek looking. It's a bit of a brushed metal look on the outside. So they look incredibly sleek and cool, and we're really excited about refreshing those. Those are going to be out in this summer, later in August. So look out for a complete refresh on the 84, will be 8402 and then the 6402 as well.
Yeah.
And then we're going to continue to iterate on the KNS line. You know, we've had tremendous success with these headphones, a very well respected line. I myself have to say I've been using my 8400s almost exclusively now for the last year, after replacing some AKGs, and I'm incredibly impressed with these, especially at the price point. They're quite a bit lower in price point than the AKGs I have by about $200. And I'm not missing anything in terms of the dynamics and production value. And we're going to continue to iterate on this line and continue to grow the KNS line into new products. You know, we'll keep our bread and butter as is, but we're going to add some new models coming into the line next year.
Nice, and very interesting for the home recording artists as well, with a small budget. Well, small.
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of breathtaking how many new artists and producers are electing to do a lot of their mixing on headphones for obvious reasons, being in an apartment or being, you know, in a location where most of your production is taking place in a shared environment with, you know, I've heard many artists say, you know, they've been trying to do their production in a bedroom at their house, but, you know, because of the pandemic, they're at home, you know, their wives or girlfriends are there. They're trying to do, you know, their job and Zoom meetings over there. And you just can't have monitors going at all times. And so a lot of producers are opting to use headphones a lot more. And you know, I think there's a delicate balance between making sure that you're checking your mix, obviously, in your monitors. But I've been able to, you know, get pretty far in a mix with just the headphones up until the point where I need to check, you know, the mix on the monitors. And the K&S line has been great for being able to achieve that. Yeah.
So K&S line and the full range of monitors.
Absolutely.
Well, great to have them in our assortment. And yeah, well, Sterling, thank you so much for your time and your explanation. And
absolutely, thank you. And just one quick note: we've got new classics coming out as well. So we're expanding the Classic 5 into a Classic 7 and a Classic 8, and those are going to be available also just a bit later this summer.
Right, in August maybe.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Well,
if not before.
Yeah. Well, let's wait on the next chip to arrive then.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that'll be it'll be just as loud. Maybe not as big, just as loud.
Thank you for your time, Sterling.
All right, thanks, man.
Nice
Appreciate
chatting
it.
to you.
Cheers.
Bye.